The train horn hit before sunrise. Not distant. Not passing. Close. The sound cut straight through the backyard like it belonged there, like it had always been there. Except it hadn't. Steel rails ran clean across the center of the property, slicing through the fence line, across the gravel strip, and into the tree line beyond. Fresh ballast stone still spilled over the edges. A maintenance truck idled nearby like this was routine. It wasn't. He stood at the edge of it all in full uniform, duffel bag still in his hand, boots still dusted from deployment. He didn't step forward. Didn't raise his voice. He just looked. A neighbor across the fence lowered his phone slowly. They said it was approved. Approved. The HOA president approached from the side path, clipboard tucked under one arm, expression calm, practiced. "You were notified," she said flatly. "This corridor was cleared months ago." He didn't respond. She flipped a page and held it out slightly. "Also, there's the matter of your balance." Stamped across the top. Final notice, $184,276 due. Lien pending. "For your share of the infrastructure," she added. "You should have handled it before you left." Silence. He set the duffel bag down, pulled out his phone, and started taking pictures. Rail joints. Survey flags. Ground markers. Then he paused at a small metal post half buried near the track. Stamped. Faded. Federal. His eyes didn't change, but something in his posture did. They didn't check the chain. Behind him, the HOA president gave a faint smile. "You can argue later. Right now, you owe us." He looked back at the track. Then at the marker. Still calm. Still quiet. How did a private HOA build a railroad through someone's property without realizing who actually controlled the land? He wasn't new to systems. 12 years in Army logistics had trained him to trust processes, but verify every step inside them. Supply chains, routing maps, clearance codes, nothing moved unless every link held. That habit followed him home. The property had come from his uncle. Not a large estate, not flashy, just over 2 acres on the outer edge of a developing subdivision. Quiet. Slightly irregular boundaries. One detail that stood out, a long, narrow strip of gravel cutting across the back portion of the land. Most people treated it like leftover space. Old access, maybe. Something forgotten. He didn't. Before deployment, he'd spent a weekend organizing every document tied to the land, deeds, surveys, tax records. Nothing obsessive. Just methodical. He scanned everything, labeled it, cross-referenced dates. One line in an older document had caught his attention, not enough to act on, but enough to underline. He left it there. The neighborhood itself was in transition. What had been scattered properties was slowly being pulled under a newly formed HOA. At first, it seemed routine, landscaping guidelines, maintenance fees, community planning. Then the tone shifted. Dues increased faster than expected. New proposals started appearing, infrastructure improvements, access expansions, future value alignment. Most residents didn't push back. It sounded official enough. The HOA president led all of it. She had a background in municipal contracting, someone who understood permits, approvals, and how to move projects through quietly. She didn't argue much. Didn't need to. Everything she presented came with paperwork, stamps, signatures. Confidence built on documents. Before he deployed, there had been one meeting he attended. Mostly procedural. But one phrase stuck with him. Transport access potential. It was mentioned briefly. Not explained. He didn't question it at the time. Filed it away. Then orders came. Deployment window opened. He locked the house, backed up his files, and left. Everything was stable when he walked out. Nothing suggested that months later, The quiet strip of gravel behind his property would become something else entirely, something built without a single direct conversation. And whatever that underlined line in the document meant, it hadn't been important then. But it would be. What exactly was hidden in the original records that no one else bothered to read? The approvals didn't happen all at once. They moved quietly, one agenda item at a time, buried inside routine HOA meetings most homeowners never attended. While he was overseas, the board introduced a proposal labeled as a limited access infrastructure enhancement. It sounded temporary, technical, easy to overlook. The vote passed with a simple majority. Most of the neighborhood wasn't even present. Within weeks, survey flags appeared along the back edges of several properties. Then came the grading equipment. Fences were cut for access. Notices were posted, not mailed directly, but taped to a community board near the entrance. Legally sufficient. Practically invisible. By the time construction started, the language had already shifted. What began as access improvement was now labeled a private rail service corridor, justified as a long-term value increase tied to nearby industrial expansion. No one stopped it. There was no single moment where it felt too big, just a series of small approvals stacking into something irreversible. And he wasn't there for any of it. When he returned, the mailbox told the story before anyone else did. Envelopes packed tight. Official headers. Final notices. He stood at the kitchen counter, opening them one by one. Dates spread across months. Each letter more aggressive than the last. Failure to respond. Non-compliance with approved development. Shared infrastructure obligation. Then the number. 6 figures. And at the bottom of the most recent page. Lien initiation in progress. He didn't react. No calls. No confrontation. He set the letters in order by date. Took photos. Scanned each page into a new folder. Then he walked outside and followed the track line again, slower this time. Every cut fence. Every joint. Every marker. When he reached the edge of the gravel strip, he stopped. The rails didn't just cross his land. They followed it. That night, he made his first call to the HOA office. The response was immediate. Controlled. All actions were properly approved during your absence. Scripted. He asked one question. Who signed off on my section? A pause. Then. You were notified through standard channels. No name. No signature. Just process. He ended the call without arguing. Without raising his voice. Opened his laptop. Pulled up the documents he'd saved before deployment. And went straight to the one line he had underlined. If everything had been properly approved, why was there no record tied directly to him? The next morning, the paperwork started moving. Not theirs. His. He created a new folder, dated the day he got back, and began logging everything. Every letter. Every envelope. Every timestamp. Photos from different angles. Close-ups of rail joints, boundary stakes, grading lines. He mapped the track's path across his property using the last recorded survey he had on file. Then he sent his first formal request. Not emotional. Not argumentative. Structured. He asked for 3 things. Full meeting minutes covering the approval period, voting records tied to the project, all permits and easement documents related to his parcel. The response came 2 days later. Partial. Summarized minutes. No signatures. No full attendance list. The vote was listed as approved by majority. No breakdown. No verification. By the end of the week, a second letter arrived. More detailed. More aggressive. Infrastructure cost allocation, revised total, $48,920. Line items included. Land preparation material, transport, track installation, administrative compliance fees. At the bottom. Projected total liability, $184,000 plus. And below that, failure to remit will result in lien enforcement and cost recovery action. He didn't dispute the number. He traced it. Where it came from. How it was calculated. What authority justified it. Then he called the county clerk's office. He kept the conversation simple. Can you confirm if a rail-related permit was issued for this parcel? There was a pause while records were pulled. Yes, the clerk said. Filed under a private easement corridor designation. Does the description match parcel boundaries exactly? Another pause. Not exactly. It references a transport strip, runs adjacent to multiple lots. Adjacent. Not owned. He wrote that down. Then requested the full permit file. The next contact came from the HOA's attorney. Not a phone call. A letter. Formal tone. Firm language. Your continued refusal to comply with a duly approved community project constitutes a violation of association bylaws. Immediate payment is required to prevent escalation, including lien filing and potential legal enforcement. At the bottom, a deadline. 7 days. He responded the same way he always did. In writing. No emotion. No defense. Just a request, citing municipal code, for original easement authorization survey alignment verification signatory authority for affected parcels. The tone shifted slightly after that. Not softer, but more careful. Another letter arrived. Same demand. Same deadline. But now with an added line. Failure to resolve may result in forced recovery proceedings. He stepped outside again that evening. Walked the full length of the track across his land. Slower this time. Measuring distances against memory. Against documents. Against something that still didn't line up. When he reached the midpoint, he stopped. Looked down at the gravel beneath the rails. Then beyond it, toward the original strip that had always been there. Same path. Same alignment. Different purpose. Back inside, he overlaid the county's permit description with his original survey map. They didn't match cleanly. Not fully. Not legally precise. He didn't react. He just opened a new document and wrote one line at the top. Boundary authority unclear. Then his phone buzzed. New email. Subject line. Final notice before lien filing. If the boundaries didn't match, how did the HOA justify building exactly where they did? The notice for the meeting came 2 days before the deadline. Printed. Formal. Posted at the community entrance and emailed to every resident. Special session, compliance review. His name was listed. Not as a participant. As a case. The room was already full when he arrived. Folding chairs lined in rows. Board members seated at the front behind a long table. A projector casting slides onto a blank wall, diagrams, numbers, clean visuals designed to simplify something that wasn't simple. He took a seat near the back. Didn't speak. Didn't acknowledge anyone. Just watched. The HOA president opened the session like a briefing. Measured tone. Structured delivery. This project, she began, represents a long-term improvement in access and value for the entire community. Slides changed. A clean line drawn across a map, labeled Rail Access Corridor, passing through multiple properties. Including his. Then his name appeared. Highlighted. Under a new heading. Non-compliant owner. A few heads turned. Murmurs. Low. Controlled. The president continued. Despite proper notification and multiple opportunities to resolve outstanding obligations, this homeowner has declined to participate in a fully approved community initiative. She paused just long enough. Then added. Service abroad doesn't exempt anyone from responsibilities at home. The room reacted. Not loudly, but enough. He didn't respond. Didn't shift in his seat. Didn't look up. The next slide displayed numbers. Projected cost distribution. Individual liability breakdowns. His figure circled in red. $184,276. Failure to resolve, she continued, will result in lien enforcement and further legal action, as outlined in our governing documents. Then she opened the floor. Any questions? Silence held for a moment. Then he stood. No rush. No hesitation. Walked forward just enough to be heard. I have one request, he said. Voice steady. Even. Provide the full authorization chain for the easement used in this project. The president didn't answer immediately. She glanced down at her notes. Then back up. That documentation has already been summarized in the materials provided. I'm asking for the original chain, he repeated. Not a summary. A slight pause. Then. That level of detail isn't necessary for compliance. He nodded once. Didn't argue. Didn't push further. Just turned and walked back to his seat. The meeting moved on. Votes reaffirmed. Deadlines restated. At the end, a final announcement. Lien filing will proceed within 72 hours if no resolution is reached. Outside, small groups formed in the parking area. Conversations low. Opinions forming. Some avoided him entirely. Others watched from a distance. A notice was taped to his door that same night. Bold lettering. Final demand, lien initiation scheduled. He removed it carefully. Didn't tear it. Didn't crumple it. Took a photo. Filed it. Then went back inside and opened the permit file again. Scrolled past summaries. Past signatures. Looking for something that wasn't being shown. Not missing. Avoided. The numbers had escalated. The pressure was visible now. Public. Documented. Designed to force a reaction. But nothing about the process had changed. Not really. And the one document he asked for still hadn't been provided. Why was the HOA willing to escalate everything except that single piece of paper? That night, the house was quiet again. No voices. No notices. No meetings. Just the low hum of the refrigerator and the faint, distant sound of metal settling on metal outside, the track cooling in the night air. He sat at the table with everything laid out in front of him. Letters. Permits. Copies of the HOA bylaws. County responses. His original deed. All organized. All labeled. Still incomplete. He leaned back slightly, eyes closed for a moment, not in frustration, just in pause. In deployment, pressure looked different. There were always gaps in information. Missing pieces. Assumptions people made because they didn't have time to check. And every time something failed, it traced back to the same point. Someone stopped verifying. He opened his eyes and pulled the deed closer again. Read the same section he'd marked months ago. Slowly. Word by word. Not looking for something new, just making sure he hadn't missed anything the first time. The financial pressure was real now. A lien would complicate everything. Credit. Ownership. Future control of the property. And the HOA knew that. That's how these systems worked. Not force. Pressure. Deadlines. Public framing. He exhaled slowly and stood up. Walked to the back window. The rails caught the light from a nearby street lamp, clean, straight, deliberate. Placed with confidence. Like no one had questioned whether they belonged there. He didn't feel anger. Not yet. Just something quieter. A shift. He went back to the table and opened a different folder, older documents. The ones tied to the land before it ever became part of a neighborhood. Before the HOA. Before any of this. There it was again. The same line. Not highlighted by anyone else. Not referenced in any of the HOA material. Ignored. This time, he didn't just read it. He traced it. Where it connected. What it implied. What it limited. Then he reached for his phone. Not to argue. Not to respond. Just to request one thing he hadn't asked for yet. A map. Not local. Not HOA. Older. Higher. He set the phone down and looked back at the papers. Everything else had been about defense. Responding. Explaining. Pushing back. This wasn't that. What happens when the fight stops being about what they built and starts being about what they were never allowed to touch? The filing went through on a Monday morning. No warning call. No delay. Just a recorded document at the county office, time-stamped, processed, and legally attached to the property. Lien active. The notification arrived by certified mail. He signed for it, closed the door, and opened it at the same table where everything else had been laid out. Same format. Same tone. Different weight. Notice of lien enforcement, outstanding balance, $184,276. Below it. Failure to satisfy this obligation may result in forced recovery, including potential sale proceedings. He read it once. Then again. Not reacting to the threat, just confirming the language. What it allowed. What it assumed. By the afternoon, the pressure widened. A call from the bank. Just a standard notification, the representative said carefully. We've been alerted to a lien placed against your property. It may affect your standing if unresolved. Measured. Polite. But clear. The HOA didn't contact him directly this time. They didn't need to. The system was doing it for them now. Later that evening, he saw the update posted to the community portal. A short line under project status. All compliance actions proceeding as scheduled. No names. No details. But it didn't need them. Everyone knew. From the outside, it looked finished. The project built. The cost assigned. The enforcement in motion. Inside the system, everything pointed one way. Toward resolution. Toward payment. Toward closure. And for the first time since he returned, there was no immediate move left to make. No document to request that would stop the clock. No response that would pause the process. Just time. And a deadline already passed. He stepped outside again. Walked along the track without stopping. Didn't take photos this time. Didn't measure anything. Just followed it from one end of his property to the other. At the midpoint, he paused briefly. Looked down. Then kept walking. From a distance, it looked like acceptance. Like the pressure had worked. Like the system had closed around him exactly the way it was designed to. The HOA believed it had. If the lien was already active, what could possibly reverse something that far into motion? The permit file arrived in full the next morning. Not from the HOA. From the county archive. Unedited. Unfiltered. Every attachment included. He didn't open it all at once. He worked through it the same way he always did, section by section, timeline first. Application date. Review notes. Approval stamp. Then attachments. That's where it shifted. The easement authorization wasn't a single document. It was layered. References to prior approvals. Older filings. Cross-linked descriptions. One line stood out immediately. Authority valid under current HOA governance window. He stopped there. Scrolled back. Checked the dates. The vote approving the project, The one the HOA kept referencing was recorded after the governance window listed in the easement document. Not by days. By weeks. He pulled the meeting minutes again. Matched timestamps. Compared signatures. It didn't align. The authority they used to justify the project had technically expired before the vote was even finalized. He wrote it down. Clear. Simple. Approval executed outside authorized window. It was a problem. But not enough. On its own, it could delay things. Complicate enforcement. Force a review. Maybe even pause part of the process. But it wouldn't remove the track. Wouldn't erase the lien. Wouldn't undo what had already been built. He leaned back slightly, eyes still on the screen. The HOA had made a mistake. A real one. But not the kind that collapses everything. Not yet. He scrolled further down the file. Past the approval. Past the signatures. Into the referenced materials. That's where he saw it. A citation. Not local. Not HOA. Federal. He didn't open it immediately. Just noted the code. Copied it. And then reached for the request he had already submitted the night before. The map. Why would a local easement approval rely on a federal reference no one had mentioned? The map didn't come quickly. It wasn't something the county clerk could just email over or print from a standard file. The request had to be routed, first through a regional records office, then escalated to a federal archive tied to transportation planning. 2 days passed. Then 3. No updates. No confirmations beyond receipt. The HOA, meanwhile, moved forward as if nothing had changed. A follow-up notice appeared on his door. Post-lien compliance review pending. A scheduled inspection date. A step closer to enforcement. He didn't respond. Didn't contact them. Didn't acknowledge the notice at all. On the 4th day, an email arrived. No subject line. Just a file attachment. Large. Scanned. He opened it. The map wasn't clean. It wasn't formatted like modern survey documents. It carried layers, old grid lines, handwritten annotations, faded markings updated over decades. At first glance, it didn't even look like his property. Then he aligned it. He pulled up his most recent survey on one screen and placed the map beside it. Adjusted scale. Rotated orientation. Matched landmarks, tree lines, elevation shifts, road angles. Slowly, the two images began to overlap. And there it was. The gravel strip. Not random. Not leftover. Defined. Marked. Running in a straight line across multiple parcels, including his. Labeled in faded block letters. Reserved Transport Corridor, Federal Contingency Line. He didn't move. Didn't react. Just kept reading. Below the marking, a reference code. The same one he had seen in the permit file. He opened the statute. It wasn't long. Not complicated. Just precise. The corridor had been designated decades earlier as part of a contingency infrastructure plan, land set aside for potential federal transport expansion if needed in the future. Most of those plans were never activated. Some were forgotten entirely. But the designation remained. Ownership, in practice, had passed into private hands over time, subdivided, sold, inherited. But the corridor itself? Never fully released. The language was clear. Private use permitted, surface modifications allowed within limits, structural development requiring ground alteration prohibited without federal authorization. He read that line twice. Then looked back at the photos he had taken. The real installation. The grading. The ballast. All of it required ground alteration. All of it required authorization. Which the HOA didn't have. They had filed under a local easement. Approved it through internal governance. secured a county-level permit based on that easement. But the permit description itself had avoided precision. It referenced a transport strip, didn't define ownership, didn't acknowledge federal designation. It slipped through because no one had checked beyond the surface. He zoomed in further on the map. Near the midpoint of his property, exactly where he had paused days earlier, a small symbol appeared. A marker. He pulled up the photo he had taken at the track. The partially buried metal post. Faded. Overlooked. The symbol matched. That post wasn't random. It was part of the original corridor designation. Still there. Still valid. He leaned back slightly. Not in surprise. In confirmation. Everything connected. The deed language. The map. The permit mismatch. The expired HOA approval window. Individually, they were issues. Together, they weren't issues. They were a boundary. And the HOA had crossed it. He didn't call them. Didn't send a warning. Didn't argue. He forwarded the map. Attached the statute. Included the permit file. Sent it to a military legal liaison office he had access to through base resources. Not as a complaint. As a review request. Clear. Structured. Within hours, the response came back. Acknowledged. Escalated. The next communication didn't come to him. It went to the HOA. A formal inquiry. Not aggressive. Not accusatory. Just precise. Requesting verification of federal authorization for construction within designated corridor, documentation of compliance with contingency transport statute, clarification of jurisdiction under which the project was approved. The tone wasn't threatening. It didn't need to be. By the end of the day, the HOA board scheduled an emergency meeting. Emails circulated. Subject lines marked urgent. The president reviewed the documents again. The permit. The easement. The approval chain. Everything they had relied on. Everything that had moved the project forward. It all held at the level they had operated. Local. Internal. But the map didn't exist at that level. And neither did the statute. They hadn't ignored it. They had never seen it. Which meant they had never accounted for it. And now, it wasn't a matter of compliance anymore. It was jurisdiction. The track wasn't just a construction project. It was a structure placed on land that carried a condition they didn't have authority to override. The kind of condition that doesn't negotiate. By the time the second inquiry arrived, this time from a federal transport office, the shift was already visible. The language changed. From compliance required to clarification requested. From payment due to pending review. The system hadn't broken. It had just expanded. And the HOA, for the first time, wasn't controlling the process. They were inside it. What happens when the authority enforcing the rules suddenly isn't the highest authority in the room? The meeting wasn't announced the same way as the others. No printed notices at the entrance. No broad email blast to the entire neighborhood. Just a controlled agenda sent to select recipients. Compliance review, external inquiry. But people still showed up. Word had spread. Not about the details, those were still unclear, but about the tone shift. The HOA had gone quiet. And quiet, in a system that had been so aggressively loud, drew attention. The room felt different this time. Less confident. More watchful. At the front, the board sat in the same positions, same table, same arrangement, but without the earlier composure. Papers were stacked higher. Laptops open. Conversations shorter. The president kept checking her phone. Waiting. He arrived early. Took a seat along the side wall this time. Not hidden. Not central. just present. A few minutes later, 2 additional attendees entered. Not residents. Not board members. One from the county office. The other introduced only as a representative from a federal transport compliance division. No one explained why they were there. They didn't need to. The meeting opened without the usual presentation. No slides. No framing. The HOA president spoke first. Measured, but tighter than before. This session is to review recent inquiries regarding the rail access project and to confirm compliance with all applicable regulations. The federal representative didn't interrupt. Just waited. Then he asked for the documents. Not summaries. Not presentations. Originals. The room shifted. The board passed forward copies, the same ones they had relied on from the beginning. Easement approval HOA vote record county permit. The representative reviewed them without comment. Page by page. Then he set them down. Where is the federal authorization for structural modification within the designated corridor? He asked. No one answered immediately. The president leaned forward slightly. This project was approved under local authority and supported by a valid easement. The representative raised a hand slightly. Not to interrupt. Just to stop the direction. The designation on this land predates local authority, he said. It was never released. Silence. The county official shifted in his seat, flipping through his own copy of the permit file. Looking again. More carefully this time. The representative continued. You filed under a general transport easement. That classification does not override federal reservation status. The president's tone tightened. There was no indication in the county records that. There is now, the representative replied. He placed a map on the table. The same one. Scaled. Marked. Aligned with the current parcel layout. This time, everyone could see it. The corridor line ran clearly through multiple properties. Unbroken. Defined. And directly beneath the section that crossed his land. The designation. The room didn't react loudly. It didn't need to. The shift was immediate. The county official spoke next. Quietly. If this designation is active, then the permit classification would be incomplete. The word hung there. Incomplete. Not invalid. Not yet. But no longer solid. The representative nodded once. Structural alteration within this corridor requires federal clearance. That clearance was not requested. The board members exchanged looks. Short. Controlled. The president tried to recover. If additional authorization is required, we can apply retroactively and bring the project into compliance. The representative didn't respond right away. He looked down at the file again. Then back up. Retroactive approval is not applicable once structural installation has occurred without jurisdictional authority, he said. Another pause. Then the next layer came. Additionally, he continued, cost allocation tied to unauthorized construction cannot be enforced against private parties. That landed. The numbers. The lien. The pressure. All tied to the assumption that the project itself was valid. And now that assumption was being removed. The president's voice dropped slightly. What does that mean for the current enforcement actions? The answer came without hesitation. Those actions are subject to immediate review. No emphasis. No escalation. Just a statement. He hadn't spoken yet. Not since the meeting began. He stood now. Not to argue. Not to present. Just to clarify. He stepped forward slightly, enough to be part of the conversation, not to take it over. You built on land you were never authorized to alter, he said. No volume. No edge. Just precision. The room stayed quiet. No one responded to him directly. They didn't need to. The statement wasn't for debate. It was already supported. The documents on the table, the map, the statute, the absence of authorization, the structure outside, the track itself, had become evidence. Not of progress, but of overreach. The meeting didn't end with a vote. Didn't close with a resolution. It shifted into process. The federal representative outlined next steps. Immediate halt on further use of the rail line, formal review of construction compliance, coordination with county office for permit reassessment. The county official added, temporary suspension of lien enforcement pending review, notification to all affected homeowners. No one raised their voice. No one argued. There wasn't anything left to argue. The system had expanded beyond the HOA's control. And for the first time since the project began, the authority in the room wasn't local. It was layered. And the layer above had already made its position clear. As the meeting broke, no one approached him. No questions. No comments. Just distance. The president remained at the table a moment longer than the others. Looking at the map. At the line. At the section that crossed his property. The same section she had once presented as a clean, approved corridor. Now marked differently. Not as access. As restriction. If the project itself was no longer valid, what would happen to everything built on top of it? The first notice came from the county. Short. Direct. No framing. Lien enforcement suspended pending jurisdictional review. By itself, it didn't reverse anything. But it stopped the clock. 2 days later, the second notice arrived. This one carried more weight. Federal header. Formal language. Preliminary determination, unauthorized structural installation within reserved transport corridor. The wording was precise. Not emotional. Not dramatic. But final enough to change direction. The order was clear. Immediate cessation of all rail use within the affected corridor. Full compliance review initiated. Responsibility assigned to the approving entity. The approving entity. Not the homeowner. Not the residents. The HOA. That shift didn't stay contained. Within a week, formal letters were issued to every property owner touched by the project. Clarifications. Corrections. Revisions. Then the financial layer followed. A revised statement was posted. All infrastructure-related charges associated with the rail project are hereby suspended pending outcome of compliance review. Suspended became reversed. A second document replaced it. Charges deemed unenforceable due to jurisdictional conflict. The number that had been attached to his name, the one printed in bold across multiple notices, disappeared. $184,276.00. The lien didn't just pause. It was voided. Recorded officially. Filed with the same authority that had approved it days earlier. The bank followed with its own update. Neutral tone. Routine language. Lien status cleared. No further action required. As if it had never been there. But the structure still was. Steel rails across multiple properties. Installed. Anchored. Connected. The next phase addressed that. The federal office issued a compliance directive. Full removal of unauthorized structural elements within the corridor, restoration of ground condition to pre-installation state timeline enforced under administrative supervision. No negotiation. No alternative plan. Removal wasn't optional. Estimates circulated quickly. Not from residents. From contractors. The cost of dismantling, hauling, and restoring exceeded initial installation projections. By a margin. 6 figures turned into more. And this time, the cost wasn't distributed. It was assigned. To the board that approved it. Insurance inquiries began. Internal reviews opened. The same system the HOA had relied on to enforce compliance now turned inward. Documentation was requested. Not from homeowners. From the board. Meeting records. Approval chains. Authority justifications. Every step that had once supported the project was now being examined for liability. Individually. The president stopped issuing statements. The community portal went silent. No updates. No summaries. Just notices. Procedural. Administrative. Final. Within 2 weeks, the first section of track was removed. Not all at once. Segment by segment. The same way it had been built. Equipment returned. But the tone had changed. No announcements. No framing about value or progress. Just removal. Gravel lifted. Rails cut. Ground leveled. The line that once looked permanent began to disappear. Neighbors watched from a distance. Not filming this time. No one claimed ownership of the decision. Because it wasn't a decision anymore. It was compliance. The HOA board didn't hold another open meeting during that period. Internal restructuring began quietly. Positions reviewed. Responsibilities reassigned. No dramatic exits. No public statements. Just correction. By the end of the month, the section crossing his property was gone. Nothing replaced it. No new plan. No alternative use. Just open ground. The marker post remained. Still in place. Still marking a boundary no one had verified until it was too late. The system hadn't failed. It had corrected itself. Just not in the direction the HOA expected. When the structure was gone and the numbers were erased, what would be left of the authority that approved it? The ground settled slowly. Where the rails had cut across the property, the soil was leveled back into place, not perfectly, but close enough that, from a distance, it looked untouched. The gravel strip remained, quieter now, returned to what it had always been before anyone tried to redefine it. No equipment. No markings. No noise. Just space. The neighborhood adjusted in small ways. Conversations shortened when he passed. Eye contact came slower. The confidence that once moved through the HOA communications, the certainty behind every notice, was gone. In its place, silence. Procedural updates replaced announcements. New names appeared in leadership roles. No one referenced the project directly. They didn't need to. He walked the boundary one last time. Same path. Same midpoint. The marker post still stood, worn, partially buried, easy to ignore if you weren't looking for it. He paused there briefly. Not to check anything. Just to confirm. Then turned back toward the house. No documents in his hand this time. No calls to make. Most problems aren't hidden, he thought. They're just not questioned. And this time, they were.